Hey everyone, my name is Shanice and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to sort of start officially a new series. I have done videos like this in the past, but they were scattered and I wasn't really devoting monthly time into doing these. So essentially what I want to make more official is doing book to film adaptation comparisons. I have done both of the Sally Rooney TV miniseries adaptations of Normal People and also Conversations with Friends. I've also done a review of Dune, the book, and also the movie. And maybe people don't know this, but I do love films. As much as I love literature, I was just one class short of having an actual minor in cinema and media studies, so I do know a bit about film history, international films. I think my favorites are Italian neorealist films and Iranian films, and the Iranian film movement was very much inspired by Italian neorealism, so it does kind of make sense. So I love all kinds of movies and I like talking about them as much as I like talking about books. So I would like to maybe do one of these every month moving forward, and this video was actually supposed to come out last month, so that obviously didn't happen. But now I am here to finally talk to you about Tess of the D'Urbervilles, the novel by Thomas Hardy, and also Tess, the film adaptation from the 1970s directed by Roman Polanski. Yes, I know. And so I'm just gonna tell you some of my thoughts on both the book and the film. And if you've seen my March wrap-up, my reading wrap-up, you'll already know that I rated Tess of the D'Urbervilles, the novel, quite low. In fact, I gave it 1 star. I'll share a few more details about my thoughts on it in the next few minutes, and then after that I'm just going to talk about how the film worked as an adaptation and also just as a cinematic piece to be studied, to be seen. So let's begin with a little bit more in-depth review of the novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So actually the novel that we know today as Tess of the D'Urbervilles was originally published in 1891 in serialized and censored form. And the serialized editions were published in The Graphic, and then a little bit later in the year it was released as a 3-volume book, and then the next year in 1892 it was released as a 1-volume, 1-novel book, which is the one that we know, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. It is split into 7 parts. I'm just going to read their titles. So the first is The Maiden, the second is Maiden No More, then The Rally, The Consequence, The Woman Pays, The Convert, and lastly Fulfillment. And this novel, like a lot of Thomas Hardy's novels, takes place in the fictional Wessex, which is supposed to be southwestern England. And this fictional Wessex was featured in a lot of other Hardy novels like Jude the Obscure, Far from the Madding Crowd, etc. It's kind of based a lot on what Hardy knew and where he was from. And so Tess of the D'Urbervilles in particular is about Tess Durbeyfield. She is 16 years old when we first meet her. She is the daughter of a haggler named John Durbeyfield. In the very beginning of the book, her father stumbles across this man who regards him as Sir, and John is taken aback because he is not royalty, he's not nobility, he doesn't have much money, but this man that he meets on the road basically reveals to him that he is in fact a descendant of a very rich noble family that went by the name of D'Urberville. So Durbeyfield is like a bastardized version of the French d'Urberville. Really, the title means nothing nowadays in John's time, but John kind of gets a little pep in his step after hearing this news, and he already has some drinking issues and he really goes a little too deep in the drinking that evening, and he kind of goes about town broadcasting this news, which embarrasses Tess a little bit. She does try to defend him amongst her friends, but you know, it's kind of the talk of the town. We know that the Derbyfields are down on their luck. They don't have much money, like I said. They depend on the father's business, his haggling skills, I guess, to make money, and he depends on his horse to take him places to travel around. Unfortunately, one day Tess accidentally kills the horse, and so she feels like it is her duty to do something for her father, for her family, for the fact that now they don't have a way to get money so easily. So she decides to go to some distant relative that apparently lives nearby. When she's there, she meets a man named Alec. I think, you know, this is a book that's been published for centuries and has been out now, so I'm pretty sure people know what happens in this book and what the book is sort of known for. Its controversial aspect, which required censorship in the beginning, was actually implicit in the text. I was actually reading this book in my road trip to Michigan, and it wasn't maybe the greatest choice for a road trip because, you know, moving westward from the East Coast, a lot of the states almost look like Wessex, especially around where, you know, we were driving. And, you know, I knew what would happen in this book and where Tess's life would go because, you know, the book is pretty famous, and I was listening to it and reading it on the road, and it's almost like that moment comes and goes. You barely notice it. It is very much implied. So this is actually what is written in the novel. So instead of describing the event that happens between Alex and Tess, this is what Thomas Hardy writes instead. He says, "Why it was that upon this beautiful feminine tissues, sensitive as gossamer and practically blank as snow as yet, there should have been traced such a coarse pattern as it was doomed to receive. Why so often the coarse appropriates the finer thus, the wrong man the woman, the wrong woman the man. Many thousands years of analytical philosophy have failed to explain to our sense of order." And then a little later, it was "to be," which, you know, is very depressing, which, you know, overall is the vibe and the tenor of the novel. Bleak, bleak, bleak from beginning to end. So I'm not sure why anyone would need or want or seek out more explicit description of what happens between Alec and Tess, but that is the route that Hardy goes. Even today, in English class, in university or younger, people debate what actually happens in the scene in the woods with the fog, because the language is kind of vague. It's just gesturing towards something, and then later on characters sort of imply that Tess was assaulted because she didn't have consent in the matter. For its time, it was very revolutionary to show how society treats women who have been assaulted. One, how frequently it happens, because a lot of the other women that Tess stumbles upon throughout the book also mention that the male proprietors kind of hit on them, they abuse them, they use them. So it's just commonplace, this kind of treatment, this degradation of women. That's number one. And then number two, how unfair, unjust, the double standard that exists when a woman does something happens like this to a woman, and how little is done to the man who has done it to the woman, how the man is given like a second chance and can just go on with their lives. So it was very revolutionary for its time, and, you know, I will give Hardy props for including that. So Tess, after meeting Alec, she essentially becomes a poultry farmer. She moves on to become a milkmaid. Then she moves on to work on very bad soil. I believe they call it specifically starved acre farms. And along the way, she meets this other man, specifically when she's working as a milkmaid at the Talbothys. This man she had actually run into at the very beginning of the book with his two other brothers who are clergymen. this man is called Angel Clare, and so he comes from a line of clergymen, very religious, strict family. Like I said, his brothers are in the clergy. Angel, though, never wanted to be part of religion like that. He seems to have a moral core that really drives his life. He has volunteered as a farmer, so he is kind of like that rich person or that comfortably living person who like acts poor, wants to be poor to like better themselves and experience what it's like to be poor. You know, he's choosing to be a farmer and to live in those conditions, whereas most farmers in the book would choose to not be farmers. So, you know, Angel is not altogether in the right with his way of thinking. He's presented as kind of like an angel, like a savior there, and a good person in a way. Personally, when I was reading it, I didn't really like him. I found him to be really arrogant and really stubborn and insisting on Tess to be with him, and she just kept saying no, 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 no. But apparently we were supposed to interpret that as her being in love but just being hesitant to reveal the secret of her past, of what happened with Alec. And that very much is true, but I don't know. I never got the sense that they were actually in love, that she actually loved him. It seemed like he was more obsessed with her and being with her because she was the farming woman that he had dreamed of as a wife. I don't know. I just didn't buy that relationship. I obviously hated Alec, and just generally it almost seems like there was no one to root for, and that's never the intention of a book, or I don't think every book needs to have likable characters or people that you're supposed to root for, but because there was just so much bleakness and on every page of the book, I just wanted someone to be a little more three-dimensional, you know? The symbolism in this book is very heavy. Tess, it's kind of hard not to see her as a representation of nature. In a lot of colonial narratives, you often see nature and the land as feminine, being, you know, ravaged by colonizers, by invaders who haven't asked permission or haven't asked consent to be on the land. So it could be indigenous cultures, it could be nature itself, it could be a rural way of living. So that narrative is very present in the way that Tess is described. She's always linked to animals or nature in some way. She's very young, she's very innocent, and she deals with a lot of animals that haven't really consented to what is being done to them, you know, the milking of the cows, people using what the cow is giving for their own profit and their own gain, the killing of the chickens in the poultry farm, etc. There's also the encroachment of industrialization on rural life. There's the presentation of the day-to-day life of impoverished folk, especially those living in Wessex, or, you know, the parallel real-life version of Wessex in England at the time. There's a heavy criticism on religion, which I was on board with, how a lot of poor people, at least in the book, they do believe and look to God as their way out of their condition. And if they just believe, they will find a way to survive and make it. And if you just have hope, things will get better. Tess is kind of the representation of, even if you believe that, even if you are so innocent and so good, horrible things will happen to you. And religion is not going to be a shield for that. So it's very critical of people who almost use the poor to drive their religion, or to almost glorify the laborer, you know, because they're closer in some way to the innocence of God. There's a lot of patronizing and condescension in that kind of messaging, which I think Angel Clare also has. Well, his whole family has. But especially Angel Clare in, you know, his choice to just be a farmer because he thinks farmers are somehow more moral and more hardworking, etc. Just lots of generalizations that are not great. And so for me, what didn't work and what really disappointed me was The writing style, which I found completely overwrought. It was like a drudgery to get through, you know. Hardy was not saying exactly what he meant. He just had a very flowery way of writing, which was of its time, as we know. It just didn't work for me personally. I also didn't really believe that this book was as pro-women as one would think. I don't know. This book, it was just suffering, 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 and it's like, we get it, Hardy. Being a woman has its hardships, but damn, can she just have like one good moment? And then she kind of does at the end, and then it's thwarted by, well, death. It was too much for me. And I was actually kind of thinking, because one of my favorite novels is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and that book, by its title, is pretty miserable, but I love it. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my favorites of all time. Another book, which also is heavy-handed on suffering, is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and I didn't like that book. So when I was reading Tess, I just kept going back to Les Mis and A Little Life, and I was trying to figure out, you know, why is it that I don't like this and I don't like A Little Life, but Les Mis work? And though I don't really have a concrete answer to that question, I'm still thinking through it, I will say that Les Mis had a greater agenda, and I feel like the little details that were included, the misery of so many characters, paid off. Like, the execution was aligned with the mission. In A Little Life, I felt like the details were sometimes superfluous to what Hanya Yanagihara was doing. In all 3, including, you know, Tess, Les Mis, and A Little Life, there is author manipulation. There's no denying it. They are trying to make you feel something and making their characters go through things to make you feel something. You can't avoid that in any of them, but I don't know, Les Mis, it worked. It was grandiose in scope, and I felt that grandiosity lacking in Tess and also A Little Life. But yeah, those are my general kind of thoughts about Tess. Not my favorite classic at all, and kind of glad that it's over and I don't have to read it ever again. And so for the movie that I chose, there have been a few film adaptations, some TV series adaptations, but the one that I chose to watch is actually here. I have it on the Criterion Collection. It is Tess by Roman Polanski. And, you know, the irony is not lost on me that a book about assault was directed by Roman Polanski. With that aside, I will begin my thoughts on the film. So this came out in 1979 and was nominated for 6 Oscars, winning Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Costumes. I will say that this is pretty faithful, actually. It stars Nastasia Kinski, who I remember from Paris, Texas, which is an amazing film. So I believe this was her debut, actually. And she, you know, has a questionable accent in the movie, but still, performance-wise, I thought she did a fantastic job. We have Lee Lawson as Alec d'Urberville and Peter Firth as Angel Clare. Those are the 3 main cast members. The men, the bad guys, I guess, the villains, if you will, of the story were less caricatured in the film. They seemed more human, less extreme like they were in the novel for me. However, because there was a little more subtlety to the performances, it almost made it seem like they became more sympathetic. And, you know, maybe you could say it's humanizing them, which is fine, but I just don't know if I really felt comfortable sympathizing with Angel or Alec. Alec in the movie was creepier, you know, because he was given the opportunity to not be a caricature from the beginning. He was just more malicious in his manipulation of Tess, which I thought worked. I also love that they call the movie Tess and not Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Tess gives her the agency to choose who she wants to be, whereas the book almost conforms with society by continuing to call her Tess D'Urberville. I do like that about the film. The landscapes were very beautiful. If you like the movie Days of Heaven, just kind of think, you know, lush, rural, wheat fields, that kind of thing. The film, unlike the novel, is explicit and doesn't blur lines in the assault scene. It is an assault scene. It even includes the fog that was present in the novel during the scene as well. And the movie poster for Tess actually does address the fact that scenes like this in books or just in life often were seen as seduction, you know, when in reality they were not. Like the novel, the film also had an agenda of its own in portraying the double standards that just exist for men and women who go through these situations. I'm not gonna lie, I thought the movie was a little overlong, but it was an adaptation of a very dry book, so what else can the filmmakers do? They were trying for a very faithful adaptation. I will say the one thing, this is a solid movie. I would give it maybe 3 stars if I had to. While solid and competent and very good as an adaptation, I did feel like because it was so beautiful, because it was so glossy, there was just something disingenuous about it all. It is a movie, obviously. We're seeing sets, we're seeing people act, so duh, it's not going to be realistic. But, you know, it's Nastasia Kinski, who's gorgeous, dressed as a peasant, but like you never really believe that she's anything other than like a model and Nastasia Kinski. None of it really looked completely authentic, even for a movie set. So yeah, it kind of takes away a little bit of the authentic look at that kind of life from Hardy's perspective, since he did document a lot of those things in his time. So yeah, as an adaptation, good. As a movie that maybe I want to pop on and watch, no. Not really. So yeah, that is my little comparison of the novel and the film. Tell me what you guys thought of either the novel and or the film. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about it. Am I the only one who didn't like the book? I know it's beloved. It's one of the driest books I've ever read. Sorry. I am actually going to do another one of these very soon because April is coming to a close, so just stay tuned for that one. And thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.